does your bow hit other strings when you're just trying to hit one string? Hi, I'm Laura from Meadowlark Violin, and today we're going to be talking about why your bow hits other strings when you're just trying to focus and stay on one string. Well, I think there's 4 main reasons why your bow might be hitting other strings. So let's start. The first reason why your bow may be hitting other strings is because you're bowing at an angle, like this. The bow should always be parallel to the bridge, and if it's not, you can see what's happening. This part of the bow is hitting the violin closer to the bridge, and this part of the bow is hitting the violin more over here, closer to the fingerboard. And this inconsistent angle is really going to wreak havoc on your bow technique. You're going to get a scratchy sound, you might hit other strings, lots of bad things happen. So make sure that your bow is nice and straight. Now, another reason that your bow may be hitting other strings is because of an incorrect elbow level. So for whatever string you're on, there's an ideal level for your elbow. So for instance, your G string, your ideal elbow level might be up here. D string is here, A string is here, E string is here. So if your elbow is somewhere in the middle in between those ideal places, you're going to hit another string. So you've just got to practice when you're changing strings, stop the bow, pivot to the next string, make sure the elbow is on the right height, and then continue playing. So something like this. Stop, pivot, stop, pivot, stop, pivot, stop, pivot, stop, pivot. Doing an exercise like that will really help your elbow learn exactly where it needs to be for each string. Another reason you might be hitting other strings is what I call the TRex arm. So if you're playing like this with your elbow down here and your arm up here like a little TRex arm, then you can see how the elbow's on a different string level than your arm, and you're definitely going to hit some other strings. So ideally, when you're playing mostly in the middle of the bow, everything should be relatively flat here. Your elbow is pretty much even with your wrist and your knuckles here, and then the fingers fall down after that. So go for this when you're in the middle of the bow and avoid the TRex arm. The last reason you might be hitting other strings is because of what I call bow trajectory. Okay, when you're moving the bow, there's this ideal trajectory for each string. So when I'm moving the bow here on the G string, you can kind of imagine where I need to move my bow. It's this kind of imaginary line. I've got to keep my bow on that trajectory to keep it on the G string. For the D string, the trajectory might look like this. For the A string, the trajectory is more like this. And for the E string, the trajectory is more like this. So you can see how if I kind of mix trajectories, and while I'm on one string, I'm dipping down into the trajectory of the other string, I'm definitely going to hit another string. And I think this is kind of hard to imagine for beginner violinists because you're probably just using a very small amount of bow, and it's hard to imagine that trajectory. So I suggest actually trying to play long bows. Try to play really fast bows. And you're going to imagine this trajectory. And when you get off that trajectory, you're going to know it immediately when you wobble or dip down into another string. So imagine that trajectory. Try playing a lot of fast bows going from the frog to the tip, and you'll really get an idea for that trajectory of your bow. Now, one final reason you may be hitting other strings is not your fault, actually. If you're dealing with a really cheap violin or maybe a VSO, a violin-shaped object, you might have an issue with your bridge. Now, the bridge needs to have the right amount of curvature, and that's going to give some displacement between the strings. Now, I have seen VSOs that had an almost totally flat bridge, which means that all of the strings are on the same playing level. There's no height difference. So that means that you can't not play on other strings. You will always be hitting other strings. So if the curvature of the bridge is not correct, you will have an issue playing on two strings at once. You always will. It doesn't matter what you do. So I'll put some links below to help you out looking for better violins if you have that issue. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like more violin tips, free lessons, and free sheet music, head over to my website, meadowlarkviolin.com. And while you're here, you can check out that video or that video and have fun practicing.